So it's Friday, November 22nd, 2019, and this is episode 5 of Film Cold Podcast. Um, I have a really good list of films today, and I'm really excited to get into it. I've been working with the format and presentation, I guess, of this podcast, and I recently got feedback from two people from different platforms about the show, and I'm not sure if it's just for them to promote their. One of them was offering a music service, or not music service, but a recording and video editing service, and so it might have been just a part of their sales pitch, but they said, and I quote, um, I hope this person who sent me this on Reddit is okay with me reading their comment. But it was very nice of them to say that they came across my show, Film Cult Podcast. As you know, you are listening to it right now. But they said that I had laid the foundations of a great podcast. So thank you very much for saying that. Even if you are just using that for a sales pitch into your service. And I don't even know if you're still listening to the show. But if you are, thank you so very much. Don't mean that in any condescending way. I really do appreciate you listening and coming across to this. And to the other person who commented on YouTube, you as well. Thanks for listening, sticking in, and cool. So yeah, I'm trying to better create these, get to some sort of rhythm, so they could be the best as possible. And my initial thought is to see the movies and review them right after seeing them. But it gets very late in the night, and I don't want to wake anybody by talking. So I try to do these while I'm by myself when I find the time to do that. And so now, this week, I'm trying to just jot down my thoughts and ideas about each movie. 3 of them, and just go from there. So I want to have coherent conversation that makes sense, a good review, and I feel like I start on something and then I finish the review and then I go back to the IMDb page or whatever it may be, and I'm like, oh shit, I should have mentioned that. I should have said that, and so I'm trying to write everything out basically in like an outline almost to make sure that I get to talk about everything that I want to talk about each movie. And like I said, I have 3 pretty cool ones to talk about today, and I can't say I recommend all 3 of them, not to like spoil each review. I will go into each one um, individually, but I can't say I recommend them all, but all of them do deserve multiple watches, which is something that doesn't even sound like it makes sense. But please stick around, listen to them, and enjoy. So the first movie that we're going to talk about today is a Charlie Kaufman film, who you may know being John Malkovich, or Adaptation. I believe he's the writer of that movie as well. These are sort of mind-bending, kind of blends the idea of reality and fiction. It's very hard to describe a Charlie Kaufman film, but if you've seen either 2 of those that I just mentioned, this is his directorial debut. So I've never seen, here's the title, Synecdoche, New York, 2008 movie with Philip Seymour Hoffman as the star of this film, and wow, what a movie. I'm definitely going to strongly recommend this one. I feel like I've never heard this movie until earlier this week. I was going through lists and stuff, heard somebody mention it, or read that somebody mentioned it rather, and I was like, that really sounds like something worth checking out, and it definitely is. This is a really, really, really strong movie. And I say that because I feel like it is able to incorporate so many different um, things so beautifully. Like, it just explores a lot of life as a concept of course of time. It definitely talks about the idea of time passing and time going on as a person in your life, and these kind of like very big um, things that every one of us tends to think about at some point in their life. Um, but without trying to spoil it, um, without trying to spoil any of these movies, I feel like I've been trying to do spoiler free, and then I've been going into the plot with some of them. And so for this, I kind of want to say, like, if you see the list of movies and if you can watch them before watching the podcast, that would be awesome. But if not, I'm trying to leave out as much as possible. I want you to get a good idea of the film to whether you want to watch it or not, and then you decide basically. But I don't want to give away, because if you spoil the whole entire movie, there is no point in watching it, right? Um, in certain aspects, because you just been given all the plot details, you kind of take away some of the magic. But this film, like I said, so intricate, so much thought was put into it. It's really one of those movies that you're like, Charlie Kaufman, like, thank you for writing this, because I don't know anyone else who'd be able to pull something like this plot of this movie off, where the connections fit and where the timelines sync, and where everything is just kind of falling into place perfectly in this movie. And these things only make sense if you've seen it, but definitely deserves multiple watches. Having only seen it once, the first time on Monday night is when I watched this movie. I can't wait to watch it again very soon, and also again in years to come, because as Charlie Kaufman said in one of these interviews, it's one of those movies that you know, with any film, you watch it at a different time in your life. Once as being a kid, and then once as being closer to an adult, and then an adult. You kind of can get different things out of movies, and because this movie shows the timeline of Philip Seymour Hoffman character Caden, his life, um, and has such a big theme of um, life and death, and um, this timeline that keeps gradually going, not gradually going forward, but very quickly going forward. Um, the first few minutes of this film seems like a morning in Caden's life, but it's actually been months and months and months being time lapsed within seconds of the film starting. So, like, if that's something that sounds interesting to you and you're like, what does that even mean? Go watch this movie. But like I said, it's like hyperlinear storytelling along with a blend of this theater, because he's a theater director, and this theater and reality mixing and kind of merging. Um, Caden decides to develop a play based on his life, um, and you see that play get written throughout his life, and you see the actors who become the people in his life get played by other actors who are playing the actor who's playing the actor. So it's kind of like a nesting doll. I kind of want to read some of my notes that I wrote here. Amazing attention to detail, as I was saying, and clearly developed plot and narrative, and things may seem confusing and hard to follow definitely within your first watch. Like I said, to watch it again, knowing the structure of this film definitely would help me get a better understanding of it. Um, but it's very hard to follow, but it's with clear intention that it's hard to follow, and almost purposeful misdirection. The names of the characters themselves, everything has meaning. Everything shown has meaning, and I will get into a little bit of, well, I'll just say it now. A more famous YouTuber and with a better sense of this film has done a very awesome, brilliant, in-depth analysis in a now 5-part series. I believe it's still going. Your Movies Suck does a 5-part series, like I said, Genius of Synecdoche, New York. Definitely look that up. has such better explanation than what I'm doing right now. Analysis on the film, and just goes way in depth on the intricacies of this movie and why it works so well. So that's my little plug for YMS. Love listening to your stuff. So anyway, like I said, we time lapse within seconds of on-screen time, and you have to be fully attentive. You can't be like half watching this movie because you need to listen and watch the movie to key into the dates that are being shown or what's being said. Um, excuse me, because it's all connected, and it's a representation of how our daily lives and our daily routines become so repetitive, and each day becomes so within the same as the next that they sort of blend into weeks and into months and what becomes our life. And, John Lennon famously said, life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. And I think that's a cool quote to parallel to this movie, because that's um, so many different things are going on in Caden's life, and it is evolving into the play as well. And uh, it becomes hard for him to recognize what's being a part of the play and what's being a part of the play of his life. You know what I mean? And if you don't, this movie is endlessly confusing, but I highly, highly, highly recommend it. Um, Go watch it. Go watch it a bunch of times. So, without going too much into it, this almost has like a Truman Show type of feel to it, in the way that it's aware, actors aware of playing part of someone's life. I don't know why, I just got that feeling from it, but it takes it in a such different way than that movie does. If you're familiar with that movie with Jim Carrey, I just wanted to mention that little tidbit because that's just something that I was thinking. But yeah, this play just keeps expanding over years and years and years. And at one point in the movie, they're like, "We've been doing this for 17 years. Like, when are we going to get to show this to people, like as an audience, as a theater production?" And it just becomes a crazy, crazy story. And Philip Seymour Hoffman's character Caden writes this play of his own life and struggles, and it expands larger and larger and becomes a gigantic set, complete with all the streets that he knows and buildings that he goes to and the apartments of the actors of his life, which are the people in his life, but are also being betrayed by actors who are betraying the actors of those actors, and it kind of has that nesting doll effect. As I'm saying, and as it's probably not making sense, actors who are playing the actors of the real person. So it becomes very, very connected in that way. And yes, I highly recommend this movie. Without spoiling any more of it, just go and watch it. Um, it's really cool, and it's free on Crackle. That's how I watched it, because I try to find these movies for free when I can, but I do not recommend watching it that way. This movie is a little over 2 hours, and with just the burst of commercials that Crackle puts in for it being a free service or whatever, if you can find a DVD, Blu-ray, streaming copy of this, definitely preferred. Commercial free is the best. Yeah, I can't recommend watching it that way. But that is my first review of Synecdoche, New York. The next movie that I am reviewing is a film that's a little more recent than that. This is Under the Silver Lake, which came out in 2018, I believe. 2019, sorry. Might have been at film festivals, yeah. It reached Cannes and everything in 2018, but came out fully in 2019. But this movie is by David Robert Mitchell, who shares the same last name as me, which that's cool. But he is the writer and director of It Follows, which was a very commercially successful horror movie that came out, I want to say, in 2017. But with the success of that movie, it came out in 2014. Wow. Okay. um, you know how time goes. That's definitely funny to talk about after that first review. But yeah, it came out in 2014 film. It Follows. I say this in every episode, but this is becoming a mess. But this is A24 produced film, which is great because that's all I've been talking about lately. And good news for everyone who's been listening. Well, not good news, but something that's different is that I did not really enjoy this movie, and it seems to have that effect on pretty much everyone. As I look through the IMDb, you either have 0 stars or 10 stars. People are saying this film was brilliant or it's dog shit, and I gotta say I sit somewhere in between. There's things that I really like about this movie, and things that I really don't. Um, I liked his first picture, It Follows, and as a horror movie, it works pretty well, and it does a lot of unique, creative things that are or were new to the screen and you don't see anymore. And one of the things, there's a lot of good references in this movie. You get all these film noir notes, and they reference Hitchcock a lot. I believe he's on a gravestone in one scene. You can see the name Hitchcock. Very early on in the movie, Andrew Garfield's character, Sam, he's watching his neighbors with binoculars, and it's pretty much almost taken out directly from Hitchcock's Rear Window. But like I said, references to film noir, Hitchcock, 1962, Something Got to Give with Marilyn Monroe, one of her last pictures, is heavily referenced in one scene. So the influences are good. Just the execution was not on par. I feel like it tries so hard to be stylistically driven in some sort of direction, but we never really get that direction. And to contrast with this first movie, It Follows, that movie also has a certain style to it where it is vague about the time period in which it takes place in. There's all this style mashing from different periods of time, and they all kind of flow to create this like vague, feels kind of 80s, feels kind of 90s. There's futuristic elements in this movie. She has a clamshell, what looks like a makeup mirror, but it's actually like an e-reader. And she reads a book off of it, one of the characters in that movie. And so that's unlike anything that's ever been made. So like it kind of seems new, like from 2019 or like from future, as in that movie came out in 2014, but that thing doesn't exist. So like what I'm saying is it has this vague time period which really worked for that movie, and I really enjoyed that idea. But in this movie I just feel like it's trying to go for some sort of stylistic personality for its own movie, Under the Silver Lake, and it just doesn't get there. I find Garfield's character to be just like too awkward and too not underwritten, but it just wasn't. I've seen so many better performances by him. I mean, we all know him from Spider-Man, but you know, Hacksaw Ridge and I believe Silence. He's in that one. Very long film. But I am going off topic here. But yeah, the pacing in this movie was lacking for me. I got bored. I was about an hour in. I checked and had like about an hour left, and I was like, "Damn!" Like, I'm just not. There feels like something's missing for me, and so it dragged a little bit. It convolutes with all these different messages and subplots. But there's one scene that sticks out in my head that is worth watching, like even on its own. It's because it's very well written, and it's kind of a cool plot thread, but they don't really explore it. It just kind of ends, and then it goes on to the next thing after. Andrew Garfield's character Sam is discovering that there are hidden signs and hidden meanings within songs and in pop culture, and he's kind of he met this one woman, and she mysteriously disappears along with this lead singer of this pop group, and there's alleged hidden meanings within his song. So he keeps exploring this, and he ends up coming across the character, and this is the scene in which I'm talking about from before. Sorry, I did a little quick pause there. I don't know if that was caught, but he meets a character called the Songwriter, and this guy who's been basically writing all these hit songs for all these different bands from basically the last century. And he explains that I've been writing the music that your dad listens to. I'm writing half the music that you've been listening to, and that the generation after you will be listening to. And he's on the piano. This guy is just referenced as the songwriter, and he's playing all these classic riffs from all these different songs. From "I Want It That Way" to "NSYNC" to "Smells Like Teen Spirit" from Nirvana, which is the protagonist Sam, Andrew Garfield's one of his favorite bands. So it kind of like links into that, and he's just referencing all these different songs that we all know and love from pop culture, and it's basically saying that this was all written by this one guy, and he doesn't put the meanings into the songs, but he just writes them and sells them, and he's this uber successful guy that no one's ever heard of because he just sold all these songs to these different pop artists. And it's a really cool plot, and it's kind of cool, and that whole scene is just written so well. You can find those clips on YouTube or whatever, but it was really cool. And then that scene just ends, and it goes off way farther to where that point of the movie is. I don't know even if that's halfway through, but like something that's really interesting and intriguing is that maybe you have some sort of suspension of belief to believe that some man is responsible for writing all these different songs. I'm talking like Queen and Piano Man and like all these different things that he's just playing on the playing the choruses of all these different songs on the piano. And he's like, I wrote that one, and I wrote that one, and you're still listening to that one, and like all this like really good, interesting dialogue. And that's like a really good scene. Like I said, look up that scene. I can't recommend this movie, but I can recommend that scene. Um, that's really well done. But then it just goes off into so much absurdity, and just I feel like it's just trying to accomplish way too much, and it ends up falling a little flat for me. But like I said, um, yeah, Andrew Garfield. I really am a fan of his as well, and this movie being driven by him doesn't do anything for me. But they use a song by REM, "What's the Frequency, Kenneth?" In which the lyrics describe a mentally ill person who keeps seeing hidden signs in pop culture, which is exactly what the protagonist of this movie is going through. That's a cool little tidbit that I just read. But yeah, overall, I can't say I wanted to like this film so much, but I didn't. And it's the first A24 film that's fallen flat for me. Um, and apparently, based on the film festival that it premiered at, I feel like a lot of people felt that way because they ended up not advertising this film as much, and I don't think it ended up doing that well. I don't even know if there's a DVD release. But yeah, so that's Under the Silver Lake. Um, if any of it sounded interesting enough to take a watch, and you liked It Follows, the other David Robert Mitchell film, uh, I I would say check it out. But otherwise, I would skip this one. And then on to our third and final film. Um, this is a movie that I just watched last night, but this is not the first time that I'm watching this movie. I remember watching it as a kid, growing up, and I really enjoyed it then. And this is 1997's The Game, directed by the amazing director David Fincher, and it stars Michael Douglas and Sean Penn. I love this movie so much. I was watching it again last night, and I'm like, this might be. I haven't made like a very definitive list. I've made many, many, many lists over the years of movies that I enjoy and what would be considered my top 10 best films of all time. Um, and this movie definitely is on the list. I don't know where, but is definitely one of my favorite movies of all time. And that's a good way to start a review. But this, as a whole, would probably be only my second or third time watching this movie. But yeah, it's left that much of a lasting impact on me, and so it just goes without saying, the accomplishments of David Fincher. But for those who don't know, he's probably most famously known for Fight Club and Seven, with Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman. Um, Fight Club being with Edward Norton and Brad Pitt. Um, he is. He directed Gone Girl, Social Network. He's executive producer for House of Cards and Mindhunter. I know he directs episodes of Mindhunter. He's probably directed a few episodes of House of Cards as well. Um, if that doesn't give you enough of a sense of his work, Zodiac, Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, um, Gone Girl's another very good film, um, from 2014, um, which doesn't feel like as long ago as it actually is. Um, but I digress. The Game, which came out in 1997, as I said, awesome movie. Michael Douglas plays a, very successful but, very lonesome, uh, banker, and he's spending his 48th birthday alone. He meets up with his brother, who is Sean Penn, um, and he offers him a, visit to a place called CRS, which stands for Consumer Recreation Services. And so this, service provides a, um, tailored experience to a person, um, and it's required to have all these tests. And like, I don't want to give anything else away because I just feel like you should watch the movie because it is that good. And I feel like, yeah, the way David Fincher directs, he does a great job in this movie, in a lot of his movies, of setting a tone. And I know we were talking about Hitchcock earlier in this review. Well, not this review, but the, previous film, Under the Silver Lake. Um, but he has a great use of, suspense that he puts in these movies, and this movie, The Game. So definitely recommend this movie. Check it out, and yeah, I don't want to give anything else away. Um, there's so many twists, there's so many turns. It keeps you guessing. It's definitely like a mystery thriller. Excuse me. There's some elements of, like dark humor as well, and yeah, just a good thrill ride of a film. And like I said, I hold a special place for it. I remember watching it, growing up, and it still holds up. And if so, is even better because I feel like I'm now sort of older than when I was. So, I can understand the plot a little bit more and, gain my attention. I just remember as a kid, this film was more creepy in a horror way than it actually is. It's not really about. There's one element in the very beginning of The Game. Um, like I said, I do not want to give anything away, but it's hard to because, it's hard to guess what the game actually is. Um, and yeah, um, it gets my recommendation. It gets somewhere on my list of, um, the best movies I've ever seen. So if that's not enough to go see it, I don't know what is. But you've probably already seen it. Anyway, that's it from me this week. That is, the cultivation of films that I chose. And I don't know if you can guess, but like, I started off the week with Synecdoche, New York. Um, like I said, I read that somewhere and I just wanted to watch that, and it left me kind of hooked on that sort of genre. So I kind of chose Under the Silver Lake because I remember seeing that on the list somewhere, and I was like, that kind of seemed like a mystery, thriller, possibly as well. And then The Game I just saw was on Netflix, and I wanted to watch that. Um, but they kind of, all three of these films kind of had a loose theme of being like mind bending, or like kind of like a thriller that blends some sort of reality with fake, whether it be like a theatrical like Synecdoche, or like there was some loose thread between all three of these films, and it doesn't always have to go like that, but it's kind of cool to compare and contrast, I guess. But anyway, that's it for me. Like, comment, subscribe. I liked hearing some feedback from some people. Would like to hear some more. So go in the comments, uh, or you can email me. Give me a movie suggestion. Anything at filmcultpodcast@gmail.com. So that's it. I will see you next Friday. Enjoy your weekend.